everybody, and welcome to another very exciting board game review. Today I'm going to be talking about a game where the entire point is that you're going to have to bluff your way past your own friends. That's right, it's another game from immediately last year, The Sheriff of Nottingham. This is a very, very fun game. It's relatively quick, it plays a decent number of players, it's just a lot of fun in general. There is a lot of really interesting little nuances with how it works, what you do, but at the same time it's very, very simple. It's a straightforward gameplay, straightforward mechanics, and it's just a fun sort of table talk-esque game to play. I really enjoy it. It's a quick little game, and so that's pretty much it. That's all the introduction that you really need for it. If you've played it, you know exactly what it is. It's essentially a deception game where you're trying to sneak goods past the sheriff, and the role of the sheriff actually rotates around. I'll get more into that as I talk about the gameplay, but first I'm going to talk about what game this is actually similar to. The game that I can think of that is most similar to Sheriff of Nottingham is actually one that is just the basic card game of BS. You remember BS, where you just have the pile of cards in the middle and you say, I have 4 threes, whatever it happens to be. I hope you don't have 4 threes because that's total BS. But either way, the entire point of the game is that you say an amount of a specific card that you have, put it face down in the middle, and then people have to determine whether or not you're lying. The Sheriff of Nottingham is exactly the same, but instead of, just numerical cards, you're using goods. You're using apples and bread and cheese and chickens. And that's it. And the whole point is that you're trying to sneak nasty little stuff past the Sheriff of Nottingham. It's really cool, and it's sort of, like I said, that was the first game that I thought of was BS, just the regular card game. But this obviously adds more in terms of you need to gain a certain number of points in order to win, etc., all that kind of stuff. Like I said, it's a great game. It's a lot of fun, just like BS. Again, if you've ever played that, then you know excuse me, then you know that there is a great deal of table talk when you're playing that game, because it's just like, no, you're lying, no, you're lying, no, you're lying. The biggest difference with this, though, is that there's only one person who gets to decide who is lying. So with that, I'll go ahead and jump right into the actual gameplay for Sheriff of Nottingham. Alright, so we'll go ahead and get started with Sheriff of Nottingham here. Now, before I really get into this, let me say first off that yes, this is technically an illegal setup because I've only got 2 players and the technical minimum is 3. But it doesn't really take away from my review, just in terms of this is how you play it, this is what you're doing, and frankly this is why it's fun. So the way that it works on initial setup is everybody gets their little character cards. The characters don't really matter, but in this case we just have red and blue. Everybody gets a little bag for all their stuff. Everybody gets 6 of the cards. And then everybody gets their bag. So the way I already said their bag, but everybody gets money. The way that I do it is I actually keep the money inside of the bag already counted out, so I don't have to worry about it, at least not at the start of the night. But everybody starts with 50 gold or 50 pieces of monies, and it's spread out by having a single 20 and then 5 5s and 5 1s, so both of them have it. Now, the way that the turns go is first you have to determine who's the sheriff. I always just say it's random. I think the rules technically say that you pick the person who was last in trouble with the law. I really am not a huge fan of that personally, but either way, it doesn't matter. So in this case, for the sake of argument, we'll say that blue is the sheriff, just so that I can pack up the bag. So everybody who is not the sheriff, the first thing that you do is discard cards. So you may notice here that we've got this big giant stack of cards and then the smaller stacks on the side. The way this works is we've got the draw pile and 2 discard piles. So what you can do potentially is if you've got discard piles with legal goods that you want, then that's awesome. Now there are 2 basic kinds of goods. You've got the green bordered goods, which are legal, and then you've got the red bordered goods, which are illegal. They're contraband. All right? So what you want to do is you want to try to fool the sheriff. You want to try to sneak past and try to get whatever you can past them. But there's a couple of caveats to what you're doing, and there's also a few variants. For example, bread in and of itself is only for 4 or more players. If you have 3 players, then you don't use bread at all. Okay? The basic object of the game is to have the most points at the end. How do you determine how many points? Well, you add up the total value of all of the goods that you get in, and that includes contraband goods. They have a value. Obviously, it's a higher value. And then you also have what are called the king and queen. So you can see here we've got the gold and silver for cheese, for example, is 15 and 10. For chicken is 10 and 5. Bread is 15 and 10, and apples are 20 and 10. Whoever has the most actual value, the most just numerical number of that particular good wins the king and or queen. If they're tied, you actually add them up and then split them down the middle. Okay, the person at the end with the most points and the most money remaining wins. That's basically how it works, and it goes for upwards of, I believe the max is 9 rounds. No, 10 rounds. So the way you do it is if you have 4 or 5 players, every person is the sheriff twice. If you have 3 players, every person is the sheriff 3 times. So it's either going to be 9 rounds, 8 rounds for 4 players, or 10 rounds for 5 players. That's essentially how it works. Okay? The first thing that you do, though, once everything is set up, you've got your cards, you go to the market. So this is where you can discard cards and then draw up the same number of cards. So let's say I don't really want the chicken, and I don't want to take a risk with the rye bread here. But you can see at the top it says counts as 2 bread at the end of the game. So numerically, if I had all of this bread, that would be a total of 4 bread, even though it's technically 3. Right, so I'm just going to go ahead and discard those, and then you take the same number of cards as what you discarded. So I'll take one face up and then another face down. So now I've actually got pretty decent cards. I've got 3 apples and 3 bread. Okay, load merchant bag, exactly what it sounds like. I'm going to be honest, at least this first round. So we'll take my 3 apples here and then put them in the bag, just like so. And then you pass the bag off to the sheriff, just like that. Okay, I mentioned that this game is like BS, the card game, so this is where that comes into play. I will say, I have 3 apples. Obviously, I am telling the truth. I have no reason to lie. So then it's the sheriff's responsibility to determine whether or not I am lying. Let's say blue sheriff thinks that I'm lying. They open my bag and they inspect it, and then they realize, oh no, it's 3 apples. And because they wasted my time as a law-abiding citizen, they have to pay me this penalty at the bottom. They would have to pay me 6 gold, or 6 money, whatever you want to call it. Okay? So that's essentially how it works. That's the basic principle. Okay? Either way, after that, I get my legal goods. No matter what they are, you get your the legal goods that you declared. You typically do them like this, so that you can see, just like that. And then you get to draw back up. Well, that's technically at the beginning of the round. See, look, now I got more apples and some cheese. It's ridiculous. I'm so legal it hurts. That's the problem. Okay? And then the sheriff passes clockwise around. Okay, now let's see what happens, oops, if we have some contraband going on. So let me just dig through the pile here. Oh, there we go. Mead. That's some solid contraband there. All right, so we got mead, and then I've got 2 apples and then some mead. So we'll say we went around again, and now it's Blue's turn once again. So we'll put all that in there. So I've got my apples, I've got my mead. Just stick that in there. And then I'll tell the sheriff, I've got 3 apples. And then they can either believe me or not. If they don't believe me, one thing that you can do, one thing that you can, even starting off, you can say, oh, where'd that 5 gold come from? Oh, if you could sort of move along the paperwork to get me through this gate here, that would be very helpful. It's just a bribe. You are allowed to bribe the sheriff, and you can do it from the very beginning. You can just say, oh, here's my bag and a gold piece for your trouble, because I know that you are a government citizen, and unfortunately, you don't make nearly as much money for the amount of work that you do. I appreciate the amount of work you do, so I'm going to give you some extra money. You know, however you want to spin it, whatever you want to do. But let's say that they don't inspect me. I get my thing back, and I'm like, oh yay, my 3 apples. And then it's like, oh, well, there's my apples. And then, well, what's this? That's not an apple. If you have contraband and if it goes through, you take it face down and you put it at the top of your card just like that. And that's all that you do. And there's a thing up at the top that actually says contraband. So let me zoom in right there so you can see it. Right there. So see, it says contraband right there. And then you just put it face down just like that. Nobody knows exactly what the contraband is, what it does, how it benefits you, because you do have what are called the, quote, royal goods. And those are things like golden apples, which count as extra apples. You've got rye bread, you've got pumpernickel bread, you've got blue cheese, Gouda. You've got the fighting chicken. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but there's some kind of like crazy fighting chicken. There we go. The royal rooster. I prefer the fighting chicken. I think it's funnier. But then you've got like pepper, which doesn't count as a good, but it just counts as money. Same thing with silk. And then the crossbow is really the big one. I believe it's worth 9. But by the same token, just like if you are telling the truth and the sheriff messes with you and looks at your stuff and it's like, oh, I was telling the truth, you have to pay me money. The same token is true as if you are lying and they find out that you're lying, then you have to pay them. You have to pay whatever the penalty happens to be. So for example, if I was smuggling in this rye bread and they found out that I was smuggling it, then not only would it be discarded because it's contraband, but I would have to pay the sheriff 4 gold pieces, right? So like I said, depending on how many players you're playing with, you'll either go through 8, 9, or 10 rounds total, and then at the very end, everybody counts up all of their numbers. So the way you count up the numbers is the actual monetary values of the goods, as well as the contraband. This is where you look at your contraband. So for example, here I got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 17. Obviously I didn't play through the whole thing, but still. And let's say if I'm the king of apples, then I would have an additional 20. So that's 37 plus however much money I have. I think I still have 50, right? And that's basically how it works. It's relatively simple. It goes fairly quickly. The table talk, like I said, is what I really, really enjoy about this game, especially when it comes to the bribery. And it can get to the point where the sheriff is outright asking, oh, are you willing to bribe me? It's like, no, why would I bribe you? It's all legal. And then it's like, oh, okay, I'll open it. And then it's like, what the, you know, stuff like that. And it's just amazing. It is so much fun because you have all sorts of just random arbitrary wackiness that can potentially occur. I really enjoy it. It's a really great game for me. And it's a small game. I mean, you can see physically it's relatively small, so it's easy to carry around. It's not as cumbersome as some other games. I don't know if that really matters to anybody out there, but either way, it's a great game. Surprisingly strategic when it comes to making all the decisions, but you can see the gameplay itself is relatively easy. I went through it fairly fast, but again, I am just by myself, just doing a basic review for it. But it's really fun both as the sheriff and, oh wow, this guy had all the contraband, that's why. So look at that, 3 and 3, ridiculous. But being the sheriff and also being the regular merchants are both fun. It's nice because unlike something like Resistance where you are the spy and that doesn't waver, this is kind of nice because it sort of spreads the hate around a little bit, so to speak. So it makes it potentially a little bit more tolerable if people aren't really keen on it. But either way, a great game, a ton of fun. I highly recommend it with any number of players. It's very well balanced, and it's just a cool game to play. There's a ton of options for it as well, as far as what you can do. Actually, since I haven't talked too much, I'll go in and mention some of those. So there's the optional rules. Like I mentioned the royal goods, for example, the cheese, and you've got the seal with the gold banner. That's how you know that it's a royal good. Anything that is the apples, cheese, bread, or chickens that is contraband, that is a royal good, essentially. So the inspection time limit, exactly what it sounds like. The sheriff is put on a clock so that they have X amount of time to look at stuff. Removing cards before the game. This is mainly for card counters because there is a set number of cards, and potentially you can keep track of how many there are left. The 7-card hand, instead of just 6 cards, it can make it more fun for both the sheriff and for the other people. And then promotional cards, for example, the St. John's Sword, which I believe was at Gen Con, but unfortunately I didn't get. But either way, lots and lots of cool stuff. A really cool game. I am mostly anxious to see if they're going to do any expansions for this, whether it's adding new types of goods or maybe adding a minor like card ability system type of thing. But right now, I think that it is great. I think there's really nothing wrong with it. I'm just mostly anxious to see if it gets any bigger. So with that, thanks very much for watching this gameplay portion. What I'm going to do now is just sort of go into an overall summary of the game, what I like, what I don't like about it, if I think that it's well balanced, and all that kind of stuff. So I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll just move right along into the conclusions and the summary. Well, that's it for me for the gameplay portion of the Sheriff of Nottingham review here. So what I'll do now is just sort of briefly go over some of my likes and dislikes with the game itself. First and foremost, I love the overall theming. I love the idea behind it. I love that the point is, you're a merchant and you're trying to smuggle goods. That's just, it's beautiful. I love that the way the game plays out with pretty much any number of players from 3 to 5. I've played it with most of the values. But one thing that I kind of am not too keen on is the sheer randomness of it. I mean, I know randomness in games, it's what we have to deal with. But at the same time, if you're stuck with a ton of contraband, or if you're stuck with, just a run of legal goods that everybody else already has a ton of, stuff like that, it can really set you back substantially, especially because the game is relatively fast and it becomes a lot more difficult to really bounce back from things like that. Obviously, being able to take from the discard pile can be helpful for that, but sometimes not as much as you'd like it to be. Either way, it's a great game, extremely high quality components, a lot of fun to play. It's very, very easy to learn, which is wonderful for new players as well. Overall, just a wonderful game. I highly, highly recommend it. Sheriff of Nottingham. And with that, thank you very much for watching. And again, for these reviews, since this is such a new section for my channel here, please feel free to give me your feedback as far as how the video itself worked. Did you like the way I filmed it, what I talked about, how I discussed it, all of that kind of stuff, because I want to make these reviews better. I want to make them as good as they can be, and your feedback, you guys are my audience, so please tell me what you think about them, but most importantly, if you want to see a specific review, then let me know, because I need ideas, and it's always great to help you guys out by doing whatever I can as the creator here, the content creator. But either way, Sheriff of Nottingham, great game, lots of fun, highly recommended, and go out and just go and play it. It's a lot of fun. But either way, with that, I will just see you next time. Once again, I hope that you enjoyed my review of Sheriff of Nottingham. If you have any particular feedback about this game, if you like it or dislike it, please feel free to put it in the comments below. And again, if you have any feedback regarding the review itself, how I filmed it, how I spoke, all of that kind of thing, please put that in as well, since this is such a new section for me. As always, I've got several things linked up at the top of the page right now, which are the playlists for my major sections of my channel. Please go and check them out. And if you like what you see, please go ahead and click that big giant subscribe button so that you can see more of me in the future. Thank you very much again for watching, and I will see you next time.